Imagine standing on the front porch of the house you grew up in, holding a 3-day-old baby pressed to your chest, and realizing your father would rather open the door for a winter storm than for you. That was the moment I understood something brutal and unforgettable. Some families don't break you because they're strong. They break you because you've been trained your entire life to believe you don't get to fight back. When my father's hand closed around my arm, when my sister smirked behind him like she'd won something, when the wind screamed against the siding and the temperature kept dropping, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, or anger, or stress. It was punishment. And I was the one they chose to sacrifice. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that within 24 hours, everything they believed about power, loyalty, and worth would collapse at their feet. Because the woman they shoved into a snowstorm wasn't the woman who would rise out of it. The night it happened started quietly, the way the worst nights often do. I had taken an Uber from the hospital, still sore from delivery, stitches tugging with every step, my newborn daughter tucked into a borrowed blanket. I told myself it was temporary, just a few nights at my father's house until I could stabilize. I didn't expect warmth or celebration. I didn't expect my father, Thomas, to hold the baby or ask if I was okay. But I thought, God help me, I thought I'd at least be allowed inside. Snow had begun falling the moment the Uber left me at the curb. The porch light flickered in that old way it always had, casting long shadows across the wooden boards. I knocked softly at first, hoping Lily would answer. My sister always loved being the center of anything. If nothing else, she'd enjoy the drama. But when the door opened, it was my father standing there, arms crossed, face hard, as if he'd been preparing for this confrontation all day. "You came back," he said, not in surprise, not in relief, just disappointment. "I just need a place to stay for a few days," I whispered. "Only until I recover. Dad, please, I have no one else." He looked down at my daughter, my tiny, quiet miracle, then up at me, his jaw tightening. "This is exactly what I expected. You made your choices, Grace. You walked out of this house at 18. Don't come back expecting us to clean up after you." Somewhere behind him, I heard the pop of a soda can and Lily's voice floating from the living room. "Is she finally here? Took her long enough?" My father didn't move to let me inside. He didn't even glance back at her. "Lily told me everything," he said. "You weren't abandoned. You weren't struggling. You just didn't want responsibility. And now you expect us to raise that baby?" I shook my head, confused and exhausted. "I'm not asking you to raise her. I just need somewhere safe for one night. I'm in pain. I haven't slept. "You shouldn't have come here," he said sharply. "We had a plan. We were going to help, and then you ran off and ruined it." My stomach twisted. What plan? That was when Lily appeared beside him, leaning against the doorframe, smiling the kind of smile that made my bones go cold. "The plan where you give us temporary custody so I can help with the baby while you recover. But you disappeared. You didn't sign anything. Temporary custody, recover, help." Those words hid something darker, something practiced. "I'm not signing anything," I said quietly. Lily rolled her eyes. "Of course not. You never do anything the easy way." "She's unstable," my father muttered, loud enough for me to hear. "Postpartum or something. We tried to guide her, and now look." My daughter stirred in my arms, making a soft, pained sound. I adjusted her gently, feeling a tear run hot down my cheek before I could stop it. "Dad, please, I don't want to fight. I just need to rest." Maybe if I had stayed silent. Maybe if I had begged. Maybe if I had pretended to be smaller, weaker, more controllable, maybe things would have gone differently. But that's the thing about toxic families. The moment you ask for compassion, they punish you for it. My father stepped fully onto the porch. Lily followed. "This is your fault," he said. "You brought this on yourself." I blinked at him, stunned. "What did I do?" "You came back," Lily answered for him. "You should have disappeared like you were supposed to." The wind whipped harder. Snow stung the side of my face. I tightened my hold on the baby. "Dad, I just had surgery. I'm bleeding. I can barely walk. Please don't do this. But Thomas Miller had never been a man who cared about pleas. He cared about control, and control meant reminding me of my place. "Give me the baby," he ordered. I stepped back instinctively. "No." His eyes narrowed. "If you won't sign custody, you can't stay here." "Dad," I whispered. Lily scoffed. "Stop whining. You always do this, always playing victim." She flicked a glance at the infant. "And honestly, she probably deserves better than a mother who can't even hold her life together." I felt something inside me break. Not a dramatic crack, but a quiet, terrible splitting. I had spent years trying to earn a place in this family, years trying to be the daughter they wanted, the sister they approved of. But in that moment, with snow collecting on my shoulders and my baby trembling against my chest, I finally understood. There was never a place for me here. "You need to leave," my father said. "Right now." Snow blasted across the porch, sharp and cold. My stitches throbbed, a deep, dragging pain. "Dad," I said again, barely a breath. "I have nowhere to go." He stepped forward. "Not my problem." Then he shoved me. It wasn't hard enough to knock me down immediately, but my legs, weak from surgery and lack of sleep, buckled. I stumbled backward into the railing, clutching my daughter to my chest, fighting to stay upright. "Dad, stop!" I cried. Lily laughed, actually laughed. "This is what you get for running away." Another push, harder. My shoulder hit the post, my knees gave out, and then I was on the porch, snow soaking through my clothes, pain blooming across my abdomen. My baby cried, thin, shrill, terrified. "Please," I begged, "please let me inside, she's freezing." My father's face didn't change. He grabbed the front door. "When you're ready to cooperate, maybe we'll talk." "She's 3 days old," I screamed. "Not my responsibility," he said. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked, and the world went silent except for the roar of the wind and my daughter's weakening cry. I curled around her as best I could, shielding her tiny body with my own, praying my warmth would be enough. But the cold seeped in fast and merciless, stealing my breath, burning my skin. My vision blurred, my heartbeat stumbled. This can't be how it ends, I thought. Not like this, not here, not because of them. But the truth I hadn't wanted to face settled over me like the snow itself. I was alone. I had always been alone. My baby's cry weakened further. Panic surged through me. I rocked her, hummed to her, whispered promises I wasn't sure I'd live long enough to keep. "Mommy's here," I choked. "Stay with me, baby. Please stay with me." The wind howled in reply. My fingers went numb. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. The world dimmed at the edges. And then, through the storm, headlights, 3 of them. Black SUVs rolled up the driveway, engines humming like something out of another universe. Doors flew open. Men in long coats rushed toward me, voices urgent but gentle. "Ma'am, can you hear me? We've got you. We've got the baby." I couldn't form words. Someone lifted my daughter from my trembling arms, wrapping her in a thermal blanket. Another slipped an oxygen mask over my face. Hands, warm, steady, lifted me from the snow. A man kneeled beside me, his expression sharp with concern. "Grace Miller?" he asked. "We've been searching for you." Before I could respond, the world tilted sideways, swallowed by light and warmth, and voices I couldn't track. But just before it all faded, I heard him say, "Your grandfather sent us. You're not safe here. We need to get you out." Through the haze, through the pain, through the storm that nearly took my life, one impossible thought pushed through. My grandfather? I didn't have a grandfather, at least, that's what they always told me. And just like that, the world I thought I knew cracked open. Because the woman they threw into the snow was about to learn she was worth more than they ever believed, more powerful than they ever imagined, and she would rise again. For her child, for herself, and for the legacy they tried so desperately to erase. The first thing I felt was warmth. Not gentle warmth, but a sudden, overwhelming heat that made my frozen skin sting as feeling rushed back into it. I gasped, my lungs seizing as if waking from a terrible dream. But the storm was gone. The porch was gone. The cold was gone. Instead, soft lights glowed overhead, and the faint hum of medical machines wrapped around me like a shield. I turned my head instinctively, searching for the only thing that mattered. "My baby," I croaked, my voice barely audible. A nurse in a Navy uniform stepped quickly to my side. "She's here. She's stable. You're both safe." Safe. The word didn't register. It didn't fit anywhere inside the world I had known only an hour ago. I forced myself upright despite the stabbing pain across my abdomen. I had expected a hospital room. White walls, thin curtains, the disinfectant smell that clung to every emergency ward. But this room was different. Warm light, ornate molding, modern equipment infused with luxury. The bed I lay in was softer than anything I'd slept on in years. Where am I?" I whispered. "A private medical suite," the nurse said gently. "Miller and Holt facilities. You were brought in with hypothermia, a partially reopened incision, dehydration, and severe blood loss. Your daughter had mild hypothermia, but she responded very well to warm therapy." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. "I need to see her, please." The door to the suite slid open quietly. A man entered, not a doctor, though he dressed with the same precision. He wore a charcoal overcoat, black gloves tucked into one hand, silver hair combed neatly back. His presence filled the room with a calm authority that made the nurse step aside without hesitation. "You're awake," he said, relief softening his otherwise sharp voice. "Good. You gave us quite a scare." I stared at him, my mind struggling to connect this stranger with the chaos of the storm. Who are you?" "My name is Daniel Hart," he replied. "I'm the personal attorney for your grandfather, Charles Holt." The words landed like a thunderclap. "My grandfather," I repeated, confused. I don't have one." Daniel's expression shifted, not judgment, but something like quiet sympathy. "You were told that. But it wasn't true." My breath caught. 100 memories collided. My mother dodging questions about her family, my father scoffing whenever I asked about relatives from her side, Lily repeating that we had no extended family because no one wanted us. "What do you mean it wasn't true?" I whispered. Daniel pulled a sleek folder from his coat and placed it on the edge of my bed, but he didn't open it yet. "Before we discuss that, there's someone who wants to see you." The nurse returned, wheeling in a transparent, temperature-controlled bassinet. Inside, wrapped snugly in a thick cream blanket, lay my daughter. Her tiny chest rose and fell steadily. Her skin had color again. Even the soft fuzz on her head looked slightly less fragile. I broke. Tears slid down my cheeks as I reached trembling fingers toward her. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. "Mommy's here." When the nurse stepped back, giving me space, another wave of emotion crashed through me. Gratitude, grief, disbelief, all at once. "She's beautiful," Daniel said quietly, giving us a respectful moment. "And she is safe now. Both of you are." Safe. There it was again. The word still felt foreign. I gently stroked my daughter's cheek. "She could have died," I murmured, "if you hadn't found us." Daniel nodded. "We received an alert. A distress signal triggered from an item you were wearing. A bracelet." My hand flew to my wrist, but only bare skin met my touch. I remembered it then. The old bracelet my mother had given me when I was a teenager. The one I had worn every day. The one I lost when my father pushed me and it snapped as I hit the porch. How did it trigger anything? Daniel's expression grew solemn. "Your grandfather had it embedded with a discrete locator chip years ago, after losing contact with your mother. When his health began to decline, he instructed us to intensify our efforts to find you." "I don't understand," I said helplessly. "Why? Why would he care about me?" "Because you are his only grandchild," Daniel replied, "and his heir." The room seemed to tilt. What? You inherited everything, Daniel said gently. $2.3 billion, along with majority ownership of Holt Industries. My heart seized. I gripped the railing of the bed as if the earth itself were shifting under me. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, that can't be right. I barely knew him. I never even met him. Your mother left home before you were born, Daniel explained, but your grandfather never stopped searching for her. And for you. By the time we located your last known address, she had already passed away. You were over a decade into adulthood. He tried to reach you. Letters were sent, calls were attempted, but your father blocked every method of contact. My stomach twisted. Blocked? Yes. Thomas Miller repeatedly returned correspondence, refusing contact, and eventually filed a cease request for harassment. I stared in horror. He never told me. He didn't want you to know, Daniel said simply. Your grandfather had made it clear in his early estate plans that your mother, or her descendants, would inherit everything. I felt sick. All those years my father told me I brought financial burden. All those times he used money as a weapon. All the times he told me I had nowhere else to go. All the years he claimed we had no other family. He had known. He had always known. I could barely speak past the lump in my throat. Why didn't my grandfather just come find me himself? Daniel inhaled slowly. He planned to. In fact, he insisted. He scheduled a meeting with you for tomorrow. The papers were ready. His medical team approved the travel. I blinked hard. Planned? Scheduled? What do you mean? Daniel's eyes softened in a way that terrified me. I'm sorry, Grace, he said quietly. Your grandfather passed away last night, just a few hours before we reached you. My breath stuttered. No, I whispered. No, that can't. He had a heart condition, Daniel continued. His doctors warned him that stress could be fatal, but he refused to delay the trip. He wanted to meet you before he signed the final transfer papers. Tears blurred my vision until the room dissolved into soft, wavering light. My mind couldn't reconcile the idea of someone who cared, someone who had fought to find me, dying before I could even speak to him. I never got to meet him, I whispered. Daniel's voice gentled further. But he knew he had found you. He knew we were on our way, and he knew you would be protected. The heaviness inside me swelled until it felt like my chest might rip open. I had lost everything in one night. My home, my family, any illusion of safety. And gained what? A legacy from a man I had never met? A fortune that seemed impossible to grasp? Ownership of a corporation I knew nothing about? It didn't feel real. Daniel broke the silence after a moment. Grace, we must discuss something important. Your grandfather left a letter for you. I think it may answer some of what you're feeling. He withdrew a sealed envelope. My name was written in strong, steady handwriting. I held it for a long moment, stroking the edges with my thumb, afraid that opening it would make everything real. Finally, with trembling fingers, I unfolded the paper. Grace, my granddaughter. If you are reading this, I did not make it to see you. I am sorry. I tried, Grace. I truly did. But time won the final negotiation, as it always does. What matters most is that you are alive, and that you are no longer alone. I paused, tears wetting the page. You have suffered more than you should have. I saw enough from a distance to know you were denied love, support, and honesty. That ends now. You will learn the truth of your heritage, your mother's strength, and your own worth. The world may have taught you to survive alone, but you will never have to be alone again. I pressed the back of my hand to my mouth to stifle a sob. I leave you everything. My fortune, my company, the legacy your mother should have inherited. It is yours because you come from a line of builders, fighters, leaders. You were never meant to struggle in the shadows someone else put you in. Take care of yourself. Take care of your daughter. And when you are ready, build something better than what was given to you. With all the love I never had the chance to show you, your grandfather, Charles Holt. The room blurred as I clutched the letter to my chest. Daniel waited until I steadied my breath before he spoke again. There is one more thing you should know. The storm wasn't the only reason we came immediately. Your grandfather's estate included directives regarding your safety. If you were ever found in danger, we were to intervene at once. I stared at him. Danger? Yes, Grace, he said. Your father and sister were under investigation for potential financial coercion related to custody paperwork. The legal team had concerns. When the locator chip showed you were outdoors for too long in sub-zero temperatures, we assumed the worst. I exhaled shakily. They left us out there. They locked the door. A flicker of anger crossed Daniel's controlled expression. We know. I gently lifted my daughter from the bassinet, cradling her against me. She stirred, her tiny fingers curling into the collar of my hospital gown. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now, Daniel said, you rest, you recover, and when you're ready, we will begin your orientation into Holt Industries. I don't know anything about running a company. That's what advisors are for, he said with a hint of a smile. Your grandfather believed in you, and based on what I've seen tonight, I understand why. I brushed my daughter's soft hair. I'm scared, I admitted. Daniel nodded. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about refusing to stay where someone tried to bury you. I looked down at my daughter, alive, safe, warm, and something stirred inside me. Not strength yet, not confidence, but the first faint spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Daniel rose from his seat. I'll let you rest. But before I go, there is something you should know. I looked up, waiting. Your father and sister, he said, have no idea you survived the storm. And they certainly have no idea who you truly are now. A strange calm settled over me, cold and clear. They will, I whispered. The day I stepped into the Holt Estate headquarters, the air itself felt different. Thicker, sharper, humming with a gravity I had never felt directed toward me in my entire life. It was strange how quickly the body remembers what it felt like to be small, to shrink, to avoid taking up too much space. For years, walking into my father's house meant lowering my gaze, softening my voice, apologizing for the air I breathed. Now the elevator doors opened to a soaring marble atrium filled with portraits, glass, steel, and people whose eyes followed me not with disdain, but with quiet curiosity. I tightened my hold on my daughter's carrier. She slept peacefully, one tiny fist curled near her cheek, unaware that the world around us had just shifted on its axis. Daniel walked beside me, calm and composed as ever, carrying a folder that had become an extension of his arm. Your orientation will begin in Conference Room East, he said. Executives will arrive shortly. They know you're the heir, but they haven't met you yet. My stomach tightened. What if they think I'm not enough? Daniel stopped walking and looked at me with a steady, almost reassuring intensity. Grace, these people worked under a man who demanded excellence. Your grandfather chose you. That alone holds more weight than any resume in this building. I swallowed hard and nodded. We walked through tall glass doors into a room that looked like the command center of a Fortune 100 empire. A long table of polished walnut stretched across the center, surrounded by leather chairs. One entire wall was a digital board displaying markets, acquisitions, and global performance stats. The Holt logo gleamed in gold above it all. I set the baby carrier gently on the table beside me and took a slow breath, bracing myself for whatever came next. Executives began filing in, men and women in immaculate suits, each carrying notepads, tablets, or sleek black folders. Some nodded politely, others looked at me with pure curiosity, and a few with the skeptical interest of people trying to quickly assess power. A tall woman with sharp glasses approached first. Ms. Holt? I stiffened, unsure how to respond to a name I had worn for less than 24 hours. Yes, I said. She extended her hand. Evelyn Price, Chief Financial Officer. I was very close to your grandfather. He spoke of you often. The words nearly knocked the breath out of me. He did? Of course, she said softly, her eyes warming. He wanted to make sure the company was placed into the right hands. One by one, they introduced themselves. Chief Operations Officer, Chief Legal Officer, Head of Global Strategy, Director of Philanthropy, Head of Security. Each name, each title, each handshake made the weight of what had happened settle deeper into my bones. It wasn't a dream. I really was standing in the center of a multi-billion-dollar empire, and these people were waiting for me to lead. When everyone had taken their seats, Daniel stood at the head of the table. "Before we begin, I'd like to make something clear," he said. "Ms. Holt will receive full training and support. She is the legal heir and majority shareholder. Any decisions regarding corporate direction will go through her approval." The room shifted, subtle but real, as heads turned toward me. My pulse spiked. Daniel continued. "The next 6 months will focus on foundational training, executive management, financial oversight, operational structure, legal frameworks, governance, and inheritance responsibilities." I listened intently, every word imprinting itself. I had no idea how to run a company, but I knew how to learn. I had spent years adapting, surviving, calculating how to move through an environment that never wanted me. This time, the environment wasn't hostile, it was simply vast. Evelyn opened a portfolio and slid it toward me. "This is a condensed overview of Holt Industries. Global holdings, domestic branches, joint ventures. You'll study it gradually, not all at once." I opened it. Page after page detailed structures I didn't yet understand, but a quiet determination rose inside me. My grandfather built this. My mother was meant to inherit this, and now it was mine to protect. A baby whimper pulled me back to reality. My daughter stirred in her carrier. I reached down, gently rocking it. Several executives exchanged surprised glances. Some smiled softly. Evelyn's eyes warmed even more. "You're a mother," she said gently. "Then you're already familiar with responsibility. That's a good start." I exhaled a shaky laugh. "She's the only thing I've ever managed without messing up." "Then you have more experience than most," Evelyn said simply. The meeting began. For the next 2 hours, I absorbed information like a sponge. Corporate structure diagrams, strategic pillars, revenue sources, market risks, philanthropic branches. It should have overwhelmed me, but the more I listened, the sharper my focus became. Every mention of my grandfather's decisions, every reference to his standards, stirred something fierce inside me, a mixture of grief and obligation. He believed I could do this. He died believing it. I would not fail him. After the overview, the executives shifted into a lighter conversation, asking gentle questions about how I was adjusting, whether I felt comfortable, if I had any immediate concerns. They were testing the water. I knew it. But not maliciously. I answered carefully but honestly. At one point, the COO, a stern man named Harrington, asked, "Do you have any business experience, Ms. Holt?" A flash of panic flickered through me, until I remembered every meal I had stretched on a tiny budget, every bill I had juggled, every crisis I had solved alone. "Not formal," I said slowly, "but I ran a household with almost no money. I raised my sister when my father refused to. I worked 3 jobs at the same time while pregnant. I'm familiar with pressure, logistics, crises, and exhaustion, and I know how to make decisions when the margin for error is 0. Silence settled. Then Harrington nodded with surprising approval. "Good," he said. "Real responsibility creates resilience. Corporate pressure is nothing compared to survival." Something loosened in my chest. When the orientation ended, Daniel escorted me to a private elevator leading to the guest residence reserved for family members or high-level executives. Walking through the quiet hallway, carrying my daughter in my arms, felt surreal. The suite was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft lighting, plush furniture, and a view of the city that made my knees weak. It was bigger than the entire Miller house. I set the baby carrier on a nearby sofa and gently lifted my daughter into my arms, holding her close. "This is our life now," I whispered into her soft hair. "A real home, safety, a future that doesn't depend on anyone's cruelty." A knock at the door startled me. Daniel stepped inside, holding a tablet. "I have something you should see," he said. He placed the tablet on the counter and tapped the screen. 2 images appeared. On one side, me and my daughter on the porch, hunched, bruised, bleeding from the reopened incision. The door closed behind us, snow swirling around our bodies. On the other, my father and sister inside the house, laughing, Lily scrolling on her phone while Thomas poured himself a drink. The joint surveillance feed. The cameras Daniel's team recovered. My fingers curled into fists. "This is evidence," Daniel said. "Clear, indisputable, locked and time-stamped." I stared at the footage, unable to tear my eyes away. The audio began playing. Lily's mocking voice, Thomas's cold commands, the moment they forced us out. My stomach twisted violently. "How did you get this?" I whispered. "A neighbor's security system," Daniel said. It captured everything from the side angle. Enough for legal action. Enough for the truth. I placed a trembling hand on the counter to steady myself. "Will they be punished?" I asked. Daniel chose his words carefully. "They will face consequences when you decide it is time." I shut my eyes briefly. Images of my father's face flashed across my mind. Condescending, dismissive, cruel. Lily's smirk as she took everything she wanted, knowing he would always choose her. They had believed they were untouchable. They had believed I was disposable. "They don't know I survived," I said quietly. Daniel nodded. "And they definitely don't know I inherited anything." Another nod. A strange warmth began unfurling inside me. Not comfort, not relief. Clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to their cruelty. I was standing in a position of power they never imagined I could hold. I looked down at my daughter nestled peacefully against me. She was the only thing that kept me fighting that night. The only reason my legs kept moving through the snow. The only reason my heart didn't stop from fear. "I won't let them hurt us again," I whispered. Daniel's expression eased. Not sympathy, but something like respect. "Your grandfather wanted you to understand something," he said softly. "Power doesn't change who you are. It amplifies who you've always been." I let the words settle. Not a victim. Not a burden. Not the forgettable daughter. My daughter stirred in my arms, her tiny fist pressing against my chest as if anchoring me to what mattered. I carried her to the bedroom, a serene space with a crib already prepared, and laid her gently inside. She opened her eyes briefly, studying the world with newborn confusion, then drifted back to sleep. When I returned to the living room, Daniel was standing at the window, overlooking the city. "One more thing," he said. I joined him. He pointed toward the skyline. "Out there, people who valued your father's name more than your well-being are struggling, financially, socially, legally. Your father is on the brink of bankruptcy. Your sister is facing eviction from her apartment. They're desperate." The information didn't ignite satisfaction. It ignited revelation. "That's why they wanted me to sign the custody transfer," I said slowly. "Not because they cared about my daughter, but because they wanted leverage." Daniel didn't deny it. "And now," I whispered, "they're going to realize the one person they threw away is the only person who could have saved them." The city lights shimmered across the glass, bright and cold. A strange peace washed over me. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, just certainty. My grandfather had found me. My daughter had survived. And I was beginning to rise. I pressed my hand against the window, watching my reflection. A tired woman with swollen eyes, healing wounds, and a child-shaped shadow behind her. For the first time in my life, I saw something else behind all that pain. Potential. "They don't know who I've become," I whispered. Daniel's voice was low, firm, and certain. "Not yet." I didn't realize how much silence could feel like safety until I woke up in the Holt residence 3 days later. Not the silence I'd grown up with, the kind that meant tension, judgment, someone waiting to pounce the moment I stepped out of line, but a calm, steady quiet that wrapped around me like a warm blanket. My daughter slept peacefully in the bassinet beside my bed, her tiny breaths rising and falling in a perfect rhythm. For once, I didn't wake up bracing myself for someone's disappointment. But healing wasn't comfortable. It was work. It was painful. And it was necessary. The team Charles Holt had arranged for me moved with a seamless precision that still startled me. A postpartum specialist, a nutritionist, 3 rotating nurses, a trauma-informed physical therapist, security personnel stationed discreetly in the hallway, and even a counselor who visited twice a week. Each one treated me with a level of dignity I had never known. No condescension, no pity, no assumptions about what I deserved. The physical therapy was the hardest part. My body had carried the weight of pregnancy, childbirth, and then the violence of being thrown onto frozen ground. Every movement hurt. Every stretch awakened pain I didn't know was buried that deep. During the first session, I cried. Not because of the pain itself, but because someone was finally helping me instead of hurting me. "You're doing incredibly well," the therapist said gently as she guided my arm through a controlled rotation. "You're stronger than you think." I wasn't sure I believed her, but I wanted to. Between sessions, I spent my hours absorbing everything I could from the introductory business courses Daniel arranged. Videos, articles, case studies, and simplified breakdowns of Holt Industries' structure. At first, it was overwhelming, like being handed the keys to a jet when I barely knew how to drive a car. But slowly, patterns emerged. Concepts snapped into place. My brain, starved for purpose for so many years, devoured knowledge with a hunger I didn't know I had. Sometimes, late at night, I caught myself whispering to my daughter while rocking her, "We're going to build something better. I don't know how yet, but we will." She didn't understand, of course, but she always blinked up at me with those dark, trusting eyes, as if she did. On the 5th day, Daniel arrived earlier than usual, carrying a tablet and several envelopes. His expression was thoughtful, measured, but not worried. "I wanted to check your progress," he said, stepping inside the suite. "And I have updates." I motioned to the sofa, gently placing my daughter in the crib beside it before sitting down. "Updates? About what?" "Several things," he replied. "Your grandfather's estate transfer is officially complete. You now hold majority shares of Holt Industries. Additionally, the legal team has finalized interim protections for you and your daughter." I released a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "So no one can try to take her again?" "Not without facing consequences," Daniel confirmed. "The evidence we recovered from the security footage alone would be enough to open a case of endangerment." My stomach twisted at the reminder. "My father and Lily left us to die," I said quietly. "Why? Just because I wouldn't sign away my child?" Daniel's eyes softened. "Because they saw you as a resource. And when a resource refuses to be controlled, toxic people react with cruelty." Toxic people. Hearing someone else name it, without excuses or minimizing, made my throat tighten. Daniel handed me a folder. "There's something else. Your father's financial situation has deteriorated further. His business is collapsing. Creditors are circling. A repossession order was filed for his workshop. It's only a matter of time before he loses the house." I looked down at my hands, tracing the faint bruising that still lingered on my knuckles. "This is why they panicked," I murmured. "Why they wanted me to sign something. They thought I had money coming from Mom's side." "They were right," Daniel said. "They just didn't understand the magnitude, or that the inheritance wasn't theirs to take." I thought of the years I had spent shrinking myself so I wouldn't upset anyone. The holidays where Lily got gifts while I got silence. The nights I sat outside on the porch so my father could have peace. The times he made me apologize for things Lily had done because she was younger and needed grace. Grace. Ironically, that was something I had never been given, only expected to extend. Daniel placed the tablet in my hands. There's another matter you should prepare for. The screen lit up, images, documents, a map. My heart stopped. It was the neighborhood where I grew up, but the map wasn't a simple image. It was marked with icons, camera symbols indicating buildings with exterior surveillance capabilities. One icon flashed red. This house, Daniel said, pointing to the flashing symbol, had a security system with motion-triggered recording. My breath hitched. Do you mean? Yes, he confirmed. We found more footage. A lot more footage. The tablet began to play the video automatically. My father's porch, snow swirling. My own voice, strained, weak, pleading. My baby, please, she's only 3 days old. Then my father's voice, cold, indifferent. You made your choice. You want to act like a victim? Fine, freeze out here. I flinched. My daughter whimpered in her crib, sensing my tension. I reached over and stroked her forehead, keeping my eyes on the screen even though every instinct screamed to look away. Lily's voice entered next. She's being dramatic like always. She wants attention. Dad, let's go inside. It's not like she won't come crawling back. I felt something inside me fracture. Not pain, not sadness, but something sharper. Understanding. They never cared. Not once. Daniel paused the video. His voice lowered. We can submit this to the authorities whenever you choose. My fingers curled around the tablet's edges. Not yet, I whispered. May I ask why? I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze with a steadiness I hadn't felt before. Because right now they think they won. They think I'm gone. They think they'll never suffer consequences. Let them keep believing that. For a little longer. When the truth comes, I want them to feel it. Daniel held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Understood. After he left, I sat in silence for a while, processing the weight of everything. My daughter breathed softly beside me, blissfully unaware of the storm we had survived. Gradually, exhaustion pulled at my limbs. I lay back on the sofa, letting my eyes drift shut, only to bolt upright moments later when my phone buzzed. Not my old phone, a new one the Holt team had issued. The caller ID read, "Private number." For a moment, fear flickered through me, irrational but familiar. Then I remembered, no one outside the estate had this number. I answered it. Hello? Static crackled, then a voice I didn't expect. Grace, is that you? My breath froze. Lily. I didn't speak. Dad wants to talk to you, she continued. He wants to make things right. I nearly laughed, almost. Make things right? I repeated softly. Yes, he knows things got out of hand. But he's still your father, and we're family. We can fix this if you just come home. Home. The word landed like a bitter joke. I stayed silent. I didn't trust my voice not to tremble. Lily sighed dramatically. Look, if this is about the baby, we can talk custody again. There were legal misunderstandings, but Dad's willing to discuss alternatives. Alternatives? As if my daughter were a bargaining chip. Grace? You're not saying anything. Where are you? Are you okay? We're worried. Worried? The same people who left me bleeding on ice. I finally spoke, my voice calm and controlled. Lily. She exhaled in relief. Thank God. Okay, listen. You will never speak to me like that again. Silence crackled on the line. My voice deepened. You and Dad made your choices. Now you'll live with them. What's that supposed to mean? Lily snapped. I didn't answer. Instead, I pressed the red button and ended the call. My heart pounded, adrenaline rushing through my veins. But not the old fear. Something new, something powerful. My daughter stirred, and I leaned over to touch her cheek. I promised I would protect you, I whispered. And I will. No one will ever hurt us again. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was preparing to rise. And deep down, beneath all the healing wounds, I knew this was only the beginning. I woke on the morning of the 6th day to a new kind of quiet, one that wasn't just peaceful, but purposeful. The pain in my abdomen had dulled to something manageable, and the bruising along my ribs had begun to fade from deep violet to muted yellow. Even my shoulder, once rigid with trauma, now moved with far more freedom thanks to the steady work of physical therapy. But something deeper had begun healing too. I could feel it every time I looked at my daughter, safe, warm, and alive in her crib beside me. The life I had thought was ending in the snowstorm was instead transforming into something I had never dared to imagine. When I stepped into the private training suite for the first time, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The room looked like a hybrid between a corporate war room and the world's most luxurious classroom. Entire walls were touchscreen displays. Shelves were filled with business textbooks, leadership manuals, financial models, and thick binders with the name Holt embossed in gold lettering. At the center stood a long table covered with neatly arranged folders, each labeled with a subject: corporate governance, financial literacy, strategic leadership, mergers and acquisitions, market expansion, crisis management, executive communication, ethics, and philanthropy. I stared at the table, my pulse quickening. All of this for me? Daniel stepped inside behind me, hands clasped behind his back. Your grandfather created this curriculum himself. He wanted to ensure that when the time came, you would be prepared. I swallowed hard. He planned all this? Every detail, Daniel said. He knew you'd need knowledge as much as you'd need resources. My chest tightened. The idea of someone investing in my future, believing in my potential, still felt foreign. My father used to mock me for asking questions, calling me naive or slow. Lily used to snatch homework out of my hands and laugh when I struggled. But here I was being prepared to lead an empire. Daniel tapped the top folder. We'll begin with the fundamentals, concepts every executive must master. I reached out and opened the first binder. Inside were diagrams, simplified models, examples, case studies, and handwritten notes. Handwritten. I ran my fingers over the ink. These notes belonged to my grandfather. Grace, Daniel said softly, he believed you would thrive, even if you didn't know the path yet. My eyes blurred. For a moment, grief and gratitude pressed so tightly together in my chest, I could hardly breathe. I wish I'd been able to meet him, I whispered. I think he knew you'd say that, Daniel replied, which is why he left these. He pressed a button on the wall. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a set of hard drives labeled in the same handwriting I had seen in the letter. What are those? Recordings, Daniel explained. Video messages he made specifically for you. Lessons, stories, and personal reflections. He wanted you to feel guided, even if he could not be here. My knees nearly buckled. He made videos for me? Yes. Why? Daniel looked me directly in the eyes. Because he knew love was something your life lacked. He wanted to give you more of it, even from afar. I pressed a hand over my mouth, overwhelmed. After a long moment, I regained enough composure to nod. Okay, I whispered. I'm ready. Daniel initiated the first recording. The screen lit up with the image of an older man. Strong, dignified, kind-eyed. My grandfather. He sat in a leather chair, papers in hand. Hello, Grace, he said warmly, as if speaking to an old friend. If you're watching this, then fate has unfolded in a way neither of us hoped. But I want you to know I am proud of you already. A tear slid down my cheek. Let's begin, he continued. Leadership is service. Influence is responsibility. Wealth is a tool, not a goal. And most importantly, never let anyone make you feel small enough to forget who you are. The recording paused. I exhaled shakily. I can't believe I'm hearing his voice. You'll hear much more, Daniel said gently. But first, some practical training. The next 4 hours were dense. I learned how boards of directors functioned, what a CEO actually did day to day, how to read basic financial statements, how acquisitions were evaluated, and how philanthropic initiatives shaped corporate reputation. My brain felt stretched, pushed, engaged in ways it never had before. But I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt alive. Whenever doubt crept in, I glanced at my daughter, sleeping in her portable bassinet near the window, and remembered why this mattered. When we broke for lunch, Daniel handed me another set of documents. "These," he said, "are the files your grandfather wanted you to study after the basics." I opened the folder. It wasn't business content this time. It was about them. My father, Lily, their financial patterns, their public behavior, their history of exploiting vulnerable people, especially family, their debts, their lawsuits, their manipulations. My blood chilled as document after document confirmed the truth I had lived but never been able to name. "They're toxic," I whispered. "Deeply toxic." "Yes," Daniel said. "Abuse doesn't always leave visible scars, but it leaves a trail." I closed the folder slowly. "Why show me this?" "So you can understand that leaving them wasn't abandonment," he said. "It was self-preservation." I stared at the file, a strange mixture of sorrow and clarity building inside me. "My whole life," I said quietly, "I thought I was the problem. That if I tried harder, if I loved them more, if I was easier to deal with, maybe they would treat me differently." Daniel shook his head. "You didn't fail them, Grace. They failed you." I swallowed past a tight ache in my throat. "What am I supposed to do with this information? Forgive them? Ignore them?" His expression didn't flicker. "You protect yourself and your child, and you decide what boundaries look like now." Boundaries. Something I had never been allowed to have. As the afternoon progressed, my lessons shifted toward leadership philosophy. I learned about executive presence, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, and how empathy can be both strength and armor. At one point, the instructor, a woman named Laura with decades of experience mentoring CEOs, watched me thoughtfully. "You've lived through hardship," she said. "That means you understand people in a way many leaders don't. Don't underestimate the way your story shapes your strength." Strength. Another word I wasn't used to associating with myself. After the training ended for the day, I walked with my daughter through the quiet garden terrace adjacent to the residence. Orange light from sunset washed over the city. The air smelled faintly of lavender. It was so peaceful, so far removed from the chaos I had come from, that for a moment I just stood there breathing. That was when my new phone vibrated. A text, unknown number. But I knew exactly who it was. "Dad, we need to talk. Dad, call me as soon as possible, Dad. This is important." Another vibration, Lily. "Please answer, Dad is stressed, Lily. We can fix this." "Lily, you don't have to be dramatic, just talk to him dramatic." My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sudden, undeniable shift inside me. I wasn't the person they had known anymore. I wasn't stranded. I wasn't powerless. And most importantly, I wasn't theirs to control. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I lifted my daughter into my arms and held her close, her warm cheek pressing against my chest. "We're learning, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm not the same woman they tried to break, and when the time comes, they'll understand exactly what that means." She blinked sleepily, her tiny fingers curling into my shirt. I carried her inside, the sunset behind us illuminating the path like a promise. Tomorrow I would continue my training. Tomorrow I would step deeper into the legacy my grandfather left me. But tonight, as the city lights shimmered through the windows and my daughter sighed softly in my arms, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to survive. I was preparing to rise. The message came early in the morning, arriving through Daniel rather than through my phone. I was still half asleep, cradling my daughter after her feeding. when he knocked lightly on the suite door. His expression, usually so composed, held a hint of anticipation. "Grace," he said softly, "they've requested a meeting." My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Who?" "Your father and your sister." The room suddenly felt smaller. My daughter stirred in my arms, sensing the shift in my breathing. I pressed a soft kiss to her head as I stood. "They don't know I'm alive," I whispered. "No," Daniel confirmed. "They believe you disappeared, and they most certainly don't know who you are now." I exhaled slowly. "What do they want?" Daniel handed me a printed email. The language was stiff, formal, and desperate beneath the surface. Requesting audience with the Holt heiress to discuss urgent financial distress, representing the Miller family, matters of survival. "They don't even know it's me," I murmured, scanning the words again. Daniel shook his head. "No, they think you vanished. They assume the heiress is a stranger who might help them secure their failing business." A bitter laugh rose in my chest. "Of course. They're willing to beg for help from someone they believe is a stranger, but they threw their own blood outside to freeze." Daniel folded his hands behind his back. "The question is, do you want to meet them?" I looked down at my daughter, warm, safe, securely swaddled in my arms, and felt an unexpected clarity settle over me. "Yes," I said, "but on my terms." Daniel nodded. "Naturally, I'll arrange everything." As he turned to leave, I called out, "Wait." He paused. "I don't want them to see me at first. I want to hear what they say when they think the heiress isn't listening." A slow, approving smile touched his lips. "Understood." Hours later, I stood behind a pane of mirrored glass in a private observation room inside the Miller and Holt building. My daughter slept in her carrier beside me. Her tiny presence anchored me as the door on the opposite side opened, and my father stepped into the conference room. I hadn't seen him since the night of the storm, but he looked older, thinner, too. His once commanding posture now sagged beneath the weight of something heavier than years. Lily followed him, wearing a cheap coat instead of her usual bright, expensive clothes. Her hair, which she once styled obsessively, was pulled into a messy bun. They looked tired. They looked desperate. But what struck me most was that neither looked remorseful. I felt my pulse quicken as they sat across from Andrew, who represented me as the heiress. My father cleared his throat, trying to project authority he no longer had. "Thank you for meeting with us. We're in need of assistance." Lily leaned forward, offering a tight smile. "Our family business is going through a difficult time. We heard the Holt heiress is considering strategic investments in local ventures." Andrew remained composed. "And what is it you're asking for?" "A loan," my father said immediately. "A substantial one, in exchange for partial ownership of our workshop. It's a respectable enterprise, but we've had setbacks." Lily jumped in. "We're humble people. We don't ask for much. We just need help. And we're loyal. If the heiress helps us, we'll be devoted. Whatever she needs." I felt my jaw tighten. Loyal, humble, devoted. Words I had never heard in my childhood home. Andrew slid a folder toward them. "Before any potential investment, the heiress requests basic clarity. She'd like to know your family structure. Who's involved in the business?" "My daughter Lily," my father said instantly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And the other daughter?" Andrew asked lightly. The air froze. Lily rolled her eyes. "Oh, her. Grace isn't involved. She left, months ago. She ran off. She was unstable. You wouldn't want anything to do with her." My father nodded quickly. "She's not part of our family anymore." The words hit like a blow, even though I had been expecting them. Not part of our family. My daughter stirred as if sensing the shift, and I gently rocked her. Andrew leaned back. "I understand. Could you tell me more about why she left?" My father's mouth curved into a hard line. "She was emotional, dramatic, never took responsibility, and after her baby was born, she made things impossible, accused us of things we didn't do." I felt my breath catch. Lily added casually, "Honestly, we're better off without her. It's peaceful now." I pressed one hand against the glass. My fingers trembled, not from sadness but from something sharper, something finally waking up. Andrew's next question was soft but deliberate. "If she returned, hypothetically, would you support her?" "No," my father said immediately. "She made her choices." Lily scoffed. "She was a burden. She didn't appreciate us. She should be grateful we took care of her at all." My stomach twisted with memories. Nights on the porch, meals withheld, chores forced on me while Lily watched cartoons, my father praising her while ignoring my achievements. But they weren't done. My father leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, to be fully transparent, Grace had a baby, a girl, and I believe that child could be leverage." Andrew stayed perfectly still. "If the heiress wants something from our family," my father continued, "we can offer the child. Grace would do whatever we ask if she wants her back." Everything inside me went cold. Leverage. My daughter. A bargaining chip. The air in the observation room thinned, and I instinctively reached for her carrier, resting my hand on her tiny chest, feeling the warmth of her life beneath my palm. Lily chimed in carelessly. "Besides, Grace isn't fit to raise a baby. She's too emotional, too weak. The kid would be better off with us. Better off with them. The same people who threw us into a blizzard." I couldn't breathe for a moment. Rage, pure, cold, absolute, spread through me like frost climbing up a window pane. Andrew remained neutral. "I'll relay your message. The heiress will decide." Lily perked up. "When will she meet us? We want to show her we're trustworthy." Trustworthy. The irony stung so sharply I almost laughed. "She'll meet you soon," Andrew said softly. "Very soon." He stood. The meeting was over. My father and Lily rose awkwardly, trying to straighten their clothes, attempting to look important. Small gestures of pride still clinging to them, despite the collapse unraveling beneath their feet. When the door shut behind them, the silence in the observation room thickened until my own breath felt heavy. Daniel entered quietly. "You heard enough?" I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. My eyes fell to my daughter, tiny, innocent, oblivious to the cruelty spoken about her, about us. "They threw us away," I whispered, "and now they want to use her, as if she's a tool, as if I'm expendable." Daniel approached slowly. "Grace, what you witnessed today is not uncommon in toxic family systems. When abusers lose access to control, they seek new methods, new leverage." "They didn't even ask if I was okay," I said, a hollow laugh escaping. "They didn't wonder if I was alive." "They never did," Daniel replied softly. I sank into the chair, holding my daughter close. All my life I had wished for their approval, their love, their acceptance. I had believed deep down that if I just endured enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, someday they might see me. But listening to them talk, casually, cruelly, without hesitation, I realized something. There was nothing left to hope for, because there had never been anything real to begin with. They didn't love me. They never had. And for the first time, the truth didn't break me. It freed me. Daniel's voice broke the quiet. "What do you want to do next?" I lifted my daughter, holding her close as her tiny fingers brushed my chin. What did I want? I wanted protection. I wanted justice. I wanted the truth to matter. I wanted my daughter to grow up never doubting her worth. And most of all, I wanted to show them, show myself, that I was no longer the girl who begged for scraps of affection. I met Daniel's steady gaze. "I want to proceed," I said. "I want to face them." He nodded. "Then I'll prepare the boardroom." As he left the room, I pressed my forehead gently to my daughter's. "They don't know me anymore," I whispered. "But they will." My daughter breathed softly, peacefully in my arms. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of what came next. I felt ready. The door to the conference room was already cracked open when I stepped into the hallway, but my father and sister didn't notice. They were too busy whispering urgently to each other, their voices sharp, brittle, full of the private panic they thought no one else could hear. I stood behind the mirrored glass wall in the adjoining observation suite, watching them as they paced the room like restless animals. My daughter slept against my chest in her soft wrap, her tiny breaths warm against my collarbone. I rested my hand over her back, feeling the steady rise and fall that reminded me exactly why I was here. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into a confrontation as the one who had everything to lose. I was walking in as the one who held the ground they stood on. Andrew adjusted the files on the conference table, playing his part perfectly. "They're ready," he murmured into the discreet mic clipped inside his cuff, knowing I could hear him through the speaker in the observation room. I took one last breath, a slow inhale that carried fragments of fear, memory, and pain, and exhaled all of it. "Let's begin." In the main room, Andrew cleared his throat. "The Holt heiress is about to enter. Please remain seated." My father straightened immediately, tugging at the sleeves of the blazer he had clearly outgrown. Lily smoothed her hair frantically, plastering on a bright, eager smile that did nothing to soften the sharpness in her eyes. They were trying so hard to look respectable, so worthy, so innocent. They had no idea that the person they believed to be their salvation was the same one they left to die. My heart beat steadily, too steadily. It was the calm of someone who had crossed a point of no return. The conference room door opened from the opposite side. They turned toward the sound, and for a moment they froze. I walked in slowly, holding my daughter against me, the soft white wrap contrasting sharply with the black of my tailored suit. My posture was straight, my gaze unflinching. I crossed the threshold like someone who had learned in 6 short days what it meant to take up space, with intention, with dignity, with authority. Their expressions morphed in waves, first confusion, then recognition, then fear. My father was the first to speak. His voice broke. "Grace?" Lily stumbled a step backward. How are you?" "Alive, standing, powerful, untouchable." I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat, keeping my daughter nestled close. She shifted slightly, then relaxed again. My fingers brushed her back once before I looked up at them. "Sit," I said quietly. They obeyed instantly. It was the same tone my father used to use with me when I was a child, the tone he used to keep me small. Except now, it didn't diminish me. It commanded. My father cleared his throat. We thought you were gone." "Yes," I said. "You made that very clear the night you locked the door." A visible flinch crossed his face. Lily swallowed hard. "Grace, we didn't know what we were doing. It was chaotic. I raised a hand. The room fell silent. "You left us outside in a blizzard," I said evenly. "My incision had reopened. My daughter was 3 days old, and you listened to her scream while you stood in a warm house with the lights on." My voice didn't shake. My breathing didn't quicken. I had practiced this calm, this steadiness, through every pain-filled night and every training session. Lily's hands trembled on the table. "We made a mistake." "No," I said. "A mistake is forgetting to lock a door. What you did was intentional." Her lower lip wobbled, a practiced tremble, a performance she had perfected since childhood. "Grace, please," she whispered. "We didn't know you'd survive." My father shot her a glare, but it was too late. The truth had slipped out. "You left us because you believed we wouldn't survive," I repeated softly, letting the weight of the words settle. "Which means this meeting isn't about guilt. It's about desperation." He straightened. "We came because we're in trouble. Everyone falls on hard times. Family is supposed to help each other." "Family?" I asked. "You mean the kind of family that kicks their daughter out into a storm? Or the kind that tries to use an infant as leverage for financial gain? Which definition are we using today?" His jaw worked. "We were under strain. We didn't think—" "You thought very clearly," I said. "I heard the recording." Lily's face blanched. "Recording?" Andrew reached for the remote and pressed a button. Audio filled the room. My father's voice. Let her freeze if she wants to be dramatic. Lily's voice. The baby cries too much. We'll sleep better without them. And then the sound of the lock. The sound I would never forget. I watched them as they listened, not because I needed to see their reaction, but because I needed to remember who they truly were, without excuses, without illusions. Lily began crying, messy and loud. My father's face drained of color until he looked like a ghost of the man he pretended to be. When the audio ended, silence smothered the room. He leaned forward suddenly, tears springing to his eyes. Grace, please, we were wrong. We can make this right. You're alive. The baby is alive. That's what matters. I cocked my head. Why does it matter to you now? Because we're family, he insisted, and family forgives. I met his gaze with a levelness I'd never possessed before. Forgiveness without accountability is abuse. Daniel entered the room then, announcing the final shift in the power dynamic. He placed 2 thick documents on the table in front of my father and sister. These are your options, I said. My father's hand shook as he touched the first folder. What options? You may choose acknowledgement and accountability, I said, or denial and consequences. Lily sobbed harder. Grace, please, we didn't know how much you mattered. My eyes sharpened. Not how much I mattered, Lily. How much you thought you could take. Her shoulders crumpled. I continued calmly. You tried to take my daughter. You tried to take my autonomy. And when you believed I had nothing left, you tried to take my future. My father's voice cracked. What do you want from us? Nothing, I said. Their breath caught. Except distance, I continued, and silence. My father shook his head rapidly. No, we can't survive without help. We need food. We need the business. You need many things, I said. But you don't need me. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Grace, we'll lose everything. You already lost me, I replied. The words hit him harder than the storm ever could. Lily leaned forward desperately. We'll do better. Please, Grace, please don't walk away. You walked away first, I said simply. The night you locked that door. Daniel spoke then, his tone cool and final. This meeting is over. My father shot up. No, Grace, wait. You can't leave us like this. We're your family, your blood. I rose slowly, lifting my daughter with me. She stirred but did not wake. Blood doesn't make family, I said. Choice does. I turned toward the door but paused, looking back at them one last time. You chose to throw me away, I said quietly. Now I choose to walk away. My father lurched forward, and 2 security officers stepped immediately between us. His voice cracked into a plea. Grace, don't do this, please, we need you. I held my daughter closer, feeling the softness of her cheek against my shoulder. You needed me when I was bleeding in the snow, I said. But you closed the door. And then I walked out, down the hall, toward the elevator, toward a future that no longer included them. As the doors closed behind me, I felt no guilt, only freedom. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the scars, the hurt, the years of silence, a fire began to burn. I woke the next morning with a strange heaviness in my chest. Not sorrow, not regret, but the weight of clarity. The meeting from the day before replayed in fragments. My father's shock, Lily's trembling voice, the moment they realized the heiress they sought was the daughter they discarded. It should have satisfied me. It should have felt like victory. But revenge, true revenge, doesn't end with a single confrontation. It ends when the truth replaces every lie built in your absence. And their lies were far from finished. I moved quietly through the suite, careful not to wake my daughter asleep in her crib beside the wide sunlit window. She looked peaceful, wrapped in a soft blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm. The morning light softened the edges of her face, making her look even more impossibly new. I ran a fingertip gently across her cheek. "You'll never know what it feels like to beg for warmth," I whispered, "or for anyone's love." A knock broke the quiet. "Grace," Daniel's voice came through the door. "We have developments." I opened the door with a careful inhale. "What happened?" He stepped inside, carrying a folder and a tablet. Never a good combination. "They wasted no time," he said, setting the items on the dining table. "Your father filed a petition this morning." My breath caught. "A petition? For what?" "Custody," Daniel said. "Again." I felt the room tilt slightly, the air thinning. "He wants my daughter." "He wants control," Daniel corrected softly. "It's a panic response. Yesterday's meeting shook him. Now he's reacting the only way he knows, by trying to reassert dominance." My hands curled involuntarily. "He doesn't get to take anything from me ever again." "No," Daniel said firmly. "He won't. But you need to understand how he's framing the petition." He handed me the first page. In cold typed lines, the words stared back at me. "Mother abandoned child. Mother mentally unstable. Mother disappeared after birth. Family concerned for infant's welfare." I felt heat surge behind my eyes, anger sharp and clean. "He's lying," I said through clenched teeth. "He's painting me the same way he always did, like a burden, an unstable inconvenience." "Yes," Daniel said, "because that narrative worked for him for years. But this time, he won't succeed." I flipped the page. "He claims I ran out into the snow voluntarily," I murmured, "that they tried to stop me, that they begged me to come back." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He doesn't know the recording exists. That is his mistake." A small cry came from the crib. My daughter stirred, and I crossed the room instantly, lifting her into my arms. She pressed her warm cheek to my shoulder, unaware of the world fighting over her. Daniel lowered his voice. "There's more. Lily has been posting on social media." Fear prickled in my spine, not for myself, but for my daughter. "What did she say?" "She's telling people you abandoned the baby, that you're unstable, that your whereabouts are unknown." I felt the rage light again, this time with a steady, controlled heat. "She's trying to create a narrative," I said. "To build a case." "Yes," Daniel said, "but we can dismantle it easily. You have evidence, you have witnesses, and you have resources they can't even dream of." I rocked my daughter gently, grounding myself. "So, what's the plan?" I asked. Daniel opened the tablet and slid it toward me. "Phase 1 is reclaiming the narrative, quietly, strategically, and with absolute control." The screen displayed a private press briefing schedule. Not public, not sensational. Controlled. "Holt Communications will release a statement," he said. "It won't mention your family, it won't mention abuse. It will simply state that the Holt heiress, meaning you, is recovering from childbirth and focusing on her daughter. That you are safe, supported, stable." "That will counter the abandonment narrative," I said. "Yes," Daniel replied, "without a single accusation." I exhaled slowly. "Good." "And phase 2?" I asked. He tapped the folder labeled Legal Brief. "We prepare for the custody hearing. We bring forward the recording of the night in the storm, and we request an emergency dismissal of their petition with sanctions for filing a false claim." I nodded, the pieces falling into place. "What about their financial collapse?" I asked quietly. Daniel's eyes flickered, not cold, not cruel, but resolute. "It's happening quickly. Faster than even we predicted. Their creditors are pulling out. Their debt is past the negotiable point." "So they're scrambling," I whispered. "Yes," Daniel said, "and their panic will make them sloppy." A sharp knock sounded at the door before I could respond. A security officer stepped inside. "Ms. Holt," he said, "you have a delivery." My stomach tightened. "From who?" The guard held out a small parcel, brown paper tied hastily with string. No return address. Daniel intercepted it immediately, scanning it with a handheld device before opening it carefully. Inside was a single item, a baby rattle. New, expensive, familiar. My heart dropped into my stomach. Daniel lifted a note taped beneath it. I already knew who it was from before he read it aloud. "Bring her home, Grace, before we take this further." The world seemed to still. My father had always known where to strike. Daniel folded the note slowly. "This is intimidation, nothing more." "It's a threat," I whispered. "Yes," he said, "and now we escalate." I held my daughter tighter, feeling her warmth, her softness, her safety against me. My voice steadied. "No more reacting, no more hiding." Daniel nodded. "Exactly, which brings us to phase 3. "What is that?" He tapped a new tab on the tablet. A set of dates appeared, meetings, briefings, training sessions, and at the top, leadership evaluation, step toward CEO succession program. I blinked. "That's for me?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Your grandfather intended for you to train under Holt leadership until you were ready to assume full control." "But I'm not. I don't know enough yet." "You know more than you think," he said. "And more importantly, your instincts are sound." I let out a shaky breath. "This is everything he built. And you are everything he hoped his legacy would become." The weight of that truth felt both enormous and strangely soothing. I took a step back from the table, letting it wash over me. Behind me, my daughter laughed. Soft, sudden, a tiny bubble of joy that cut through the tension in the air. I turned and smiled despite everything. "Maybe I can do this," I whispered to her. "Maybe we can." Daniel nodded. "You can, and you will." The rest of the morning unfolded like a strategy session rather than a lesson. I reviewed crisis communication tactics, learned how to anticipate legal retaliation, and studied similar cases where women rebuilt their lives from the ashes of toxic family structures. Every piece of knowledge felt like armor. Every skill felt like a step away from who I had been. By afternoon, we moved into scenario training, mock negotiations, public speaking exercises, questions I might face as heir and eventual CEO. At first, my voice trembled, my palms sweated. Memories of my father calling me weak, dramatic, unprepared crept into my mind like shadows. But the more I spoke, the more those voices faded. By the end of the session, the instructor, a formidable woman with decades in executive leadership, looked at me with quiet satisfaction. "You're not learning how to be powerful," she said. "You're remembering that you always were." That night, after I fed and settled my daughter, I sat beside her crib and watched the soft glow of the nightlight illuminate her tiny features. The world outside our window buzzed with movement, cars, lights, ambition. But inside this room, everything was still. Still, but not stuck. Safe, but not small. Healing, but not hiding. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "When you grow up, I want you to know something," I whispered. "Strength isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It isn't a fist or a door slamming shut." I pressed my hand over her. "Strength is choosing who you become after someone tried to break you." Her fingers curled around mine, tiny and warm. And I knew in that moment that I wasn't just preparing to fight for myself. I was preparing to lead, to rise, to prove that surviving the storm wasn't my ending. It was my beginning. And soon, the people who threw me into it would learn exactly what I had become. The paperwork arrived at 7 a.m, delivered not by a courier but by a county sheriff standing stiffly in the hallway outside my suite. His expression was neutral, professional, but even he couldn't hide the flicker of discomfort when Daniel opened the door and accepted the sealed envelope. "Emergency custody petition," the sheriff said quietly, "filed by Thomas Miller, hearing scheduled for 3 days from now." 3 days. My pulse throbbed once, sharp, cold, but I didn't flinch. My daughter slept in her crib by the window, soft morning light washing over her tiny form. She looked peaceful, unaware that someone who had once sworn to protect me was now trying to legally steal her. Daniel closed the door, his jaw tightening as he handed me the envelope. "Grace, remember, this is expected. And we're ready." Expected. Ready. The words didn't lessen the sting of betrayal, but they anchored me. I broke the seal and unfolded the documents. There it was again, in black and white lies stacked on top of half-truths. Mother abandoned newborn child. Mother displays psychological instability. Child endangered under maternal care. Grandfather figure must intervene for child's safety. My laugh escaped before I could stop it. Short, bitter, disbelieving. Daniel watched me carefully. "He's hoping you'll fold under pressure." "No," I murmured. "He's hoping I'm still the girl he trained me to be." Broken, malleable, silent. But that girl no longer existed. Daniel took the papers gently from my hands. "Let's begin. There's much to prepare." I nodded, lifting my daughter into my arms. Her warmth steadied me. "Let them try," I whispered into her soft hair. "They're about to learn who I really am." We moved into the strategy room, a space that had become as familiar to me now as any childhood memory. Walls of digital screens, a sleek table loaded with case files, research reports, and evidence folders. It felt like walking into the war room of my own rebirth. Andrew joined us, placing a fresh stack of files onto the table. "We'll start with the family court landscape," he said. "It's critical we understand the judge first." I took my seat. "Who is he?" "Judge Harold Whitford," Andrew replied. "Old school, traditionalist. Believes in the sanctity of biological family structure. Often sides with the older parental figure, especially the father." I swallowed hard. "So, he's biased." "Deeply," Andrew said. "But bias is only as strong as the narrative it's allowed to swallow, which is why we dismantle their narrative piece by piece." He slid forward a file. "This is the story Thomas will try to sell. You're unstable, irresponsible, overwhelmed, and unfit. The perfect picture of a struggling new mother with no support and emotional fragility." My breath tightened. He knows exactly how to weaponize that. "Yes," Andrew said, "because he trained you to show those behaviors. But here's the difference now. You're not walking into court alone." Daniel nodded. "You walk in as the Holt heiress, with documented support from pediatricians, postpartum specialists, and a network of staff. They'll argue instability, but the evidence will show stability, wealth, and full-time care." "And the recording?" I asked softly. Andrew's jaw set. "The recording is our final blow. But we'll introduce it strategically, not too early. We let their lies build, and then we collapse them." My heartbeat steadied as I imagined the moment the truth hit them like a falling wall. Daniel continued, "Before we get to evidence, we need to understand intent. Your father's goal isn't the child. It's leverage, control, a bargaining chip." My stomach twisted. "He doesn't care about her." "No," Daniel agreed, "but he cares that you do, and that makes her valuable to him." Silence settled over the room for a moment. I rocked my daughter gently, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "We won't let him near her," I whispered. "You won't have to," Daniel said, "but you must prepare emotionally. Family court is unpredictable. Even with wealth, evidence, and support, the wrong framing can tilt the room." I straightened. "Then we control the frame." Andrew smiled faintly. "Exactly." We began. For hours I learned everything about family law, custody types, evidentiary thresholds, credibility assessments, parental fitness metrics. I learned how to present answers concisely, how to maintain composure under pressure, how to turn accusations into opportunities. But there was something else, something harder. I had to revisit the night of the storm. "Grace," Daniel said gently, "you need to be ready to talk about what happened, not as a victim, but as a narrator." I nodded slowly. "I can do that." But when the video appeared on the screen, the porch, the snow, the sound of the lock, I felt my throat close. My daughter whimpered in my arms, feeling the tension ripple through me. Andrew paused the playback instantly. "You don't have to watch it." "No," I said, voice trembling but steady. "I do." I relived it, not as the girl begging for warmth, but as the woman who survived it. And when the video ended, I didn't cry. I exhaled. "It feels different now." Daniel nodded. "Because you're no longer inside the moment. You're standing above it." I set my daughter back into her bassinet, letting her curl her tiny fingers around the blanket edge. "Now," Andrew said, sliding another file toward me, "let's discuss testimonies." My stomach tightened again. "Who can we call?" "Your medical team," Daniel said. "Your postpartum specialist. The physical therapist who treated your reopened incision. The neonatal nurse who documented your daughter's hypothermia." "And Dr. Rivera," Andrew added. "She's agreed to testify about the night she found you." My breath hitched. "She's willing to go against them?" She said, and I quote, "I refuse to let cruelty rewrite the truth." Emotion welled in my chest. "She saved us." Daniel softened. "And now she'll help save your future." The rest of the day unfolded in a meticulous rhythm: timelines, evidence cataloging, communication prep. My fatigue grew, but so did my resolve. At one point during a break, I stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city. The wind was cool, crisp, no snow, no storm, just light stretching toward the horizon. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize, but the preview text told me everything. "Dad, where are you? We need to talk. It's urgent." "Dad, we can fix this, Grace. Just come home." "Dad, don't turn against your family." A final message arrived moments later. "Dad, if you don't help us, we'll lose everything. You owe us that much." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Owe us? I thought of the nights I cooked dinner at 12 years old, the mornings I walked Lily to school while he slept, the hours I worked while pregnant because he refused to help. I thought of the storm, the cold, my daughter's weakening cries. I typed slowly. "I don't owe you anything," and pressed send. Later that evening, Daniel returned with another update. "Grace," he said, "the judge has agreed to hear the case early, tomorrow morning." My breath caught. "Tomorrow?" "Yes, which is good. It means we strike before they regroup." I nodded, clutching my daughter close. He studied me carefully. "Grace, you're ready." I met his gaze, feeling the truth settle inside me like a steady flame. "No," I said softly. "I'm not just ready." I looked down at my daughter, my reason, my anchor. "I'm determined." That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat by my daughter's crib, watching her tiny fists curl and uncurl, her breaths soft and steady, her innocence unshaken. And in the quiet dark, I whispered to her, "They thought they buried us, but they didn't know we were seeds." Her fingers twitched in her sleep. Tomorrow the truth would stand in a courtroom. Tomorrow the lies would crumble. Tomorrow everything would change. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of change. I was ready to command it. I arrived at the courthouse with my daughter held close to my chest, her soft breath warming the skin beneath my collar. She was too young to understand anything happening around her, too innocent to feel the weight of the moment, too pure to sense the battlefield I was walking into. But somehow, having her against me made me stronger. Daniel walked beside me, carrying a slim briefcase containing the evidence that would decide both of our futures. Andrew followed behind, his expression calm, strategic, unrattled. 2 Holt security officers held back the crowd of reporters gathered near the steps. Cameras flashed. "Ms. Holt, is it true your father is suing you for custody?" "Grace, why did you disappear after childbirth? Are you fit to raise your child?" I didn't flinch, not because I didn't feel the sting of their words, but because I had survived worse. Words couldn't break me now. Inside, the courthouse was cold, echoing, unforgiving. The room designated for the emergency hearing was already filled when we entered. Lawyers, clerks, and in the front row, my father and Lily. My heart stuttered for one brief second. They looked different today. My father's skin was pale and drawn tight around his jaw. His clothes were wrinkled. He looked like a man who had slept in his car. Lily sat stiffly beside him, hands white-knuckled around her handbag. She locked eyes with me for one sharp moment before looking away, her face contorted in a mix of shock, envy, and something that looked suspiciously like fear. Good, I thought. Fear means truth is coming. I took my place at the respondents' table. My daughter shifted in her sling, and Daniel discreetly adjusted the soft blanket around her. Judge Whitford entered the courtroom with the heavy authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. He was older, stiff-backed, wearing glasses that magnified the cold scrutiny in his eyes. He cleared his throat. "This is the emergency custody petition regarding the minor child of Grace Miller," he announced. "I will hear both sides. Petitioners first." My father rose, his lawyer stepping beside him. He shot a practiced look toward the judge, a mix of humility and paternal concern. "Your Honor," my father began, voice steady, rehearsed. "We are here because my daughter is not well." The words hit me like ice. He continued, "Grace abandoned her newborn. She left our home in the middle of the night, behaving erratically and endangering the child. We have reason to believe she is mentally unstable. My other daughter, Lily, and I have been caring for the baby since Grace ran off. We simply want what's best for our grandchild." Lily dabbed her eyes with a tissue, a performance she had perfected since childhood. I stared at them both, stunned not by the lies, because lies were their native language, but by the ease with which they told them. The judge nodded slowly, steepling his fingers. "I see. And do you have supporting evidence?" My father's lawyer presented several statements, one from a neighbor who saw me storm out, one from an acquaintance claiming I was emotionally unpredictable, and one from a former coworker who barely knew me. Fabrications wrapped in half-truths. I felt Daniel tense beside me. "And now," the lawyer said dramatically, "the child's mother has resurfaced mysteriously with significant financial backing. This sudden change suggests instability and questionable influence on the child's upbringing." They were implying I was being manipulated by an anonymous benefactor, or bought. My blood simmered. When they finished, the judge turned to me. "Ms. Miller, you may present your response." I rose slowly, steadying myself with one hand on the table. "First, I'd like to correct the record. My name is no longer Miller. My legal name is Grace Holt." A quiet murmur rippled through the courtroom. My father stiffened. Lily's mouth fell open. I continued. "Second, I did not abandon my baby. My father and sister removed us from their home and locked the door during a blizzard, leaving me, 9 days postpartum, bleeding in the snow while my daughter screamed in my arms." Gasps sounded behind me. Daniel handed me a folder, which I placed on the judge's desk. "Here is the medical report from the night of the incident. It documents my reopened incision, my blood loss, my daughter's hypothermia." The judge flipped through the papers, his eyebrows pulling together. My father's lawyer interjected quickly. "Your Honor, this proves nothing about who caused the injury. She could have left voluntarily. I also have audio," I said. Silence dropped like a stone. Daniel pressed a remote, and the small speaker on the judge's bench crackled to life. My father's voice filled the room. "Let her freeze if she wants to be dramatic." Lily's voice followed, sharp and unmistakable. "The baby cries too much. We'll sleep better without them." And then, the sound none of us could forget. The click of the lock. My father lurched forward. "That audio is taken out of context. It's manipulated." The judge's face hardened. "Sit down, Mr. Miller." Lily shook her head wildly, eyes red. "We didn't mean it. We were overwhelmed. Grace is exaggerating. It wasn't like—" "Enough," the judge said sharply. Daniel stepped forward. Your Honor, the audio was retrieved directly from a neighbor's security system, time-stamped, unedited. We also have statements from medical professionals who treated both mother and child, verifying the physical trauma consistent with the recording. He handed over another file. And finally, he added, this is Grace's support structure. A pediatric team, a postpartum specialist, full-time childcare assistants, a secured residence with proper accommodations and financial stability. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. My father's lawyer scrambled. Your Honor, this still doesn't prove she can care for... Judge Whitford held up a hand. I've heard enough. My heart pounded, my daughter stirring softly against me. The judge folded his hands. His voice was steady, authoritative. Mr. Miller, Ms. Lily Miller, your petition is denied. I exhaled shakily, but he wasn't done. Furthermore, in light of the evidence presented, this court finds your claims to be deliberately false and malicious. I am granting full custody to the mother, Ms. Holt. My vision blurred. Additionally, he continued, due to the demonstrated danger posed to the child, visitation rights for the petitioners are hereby suspended indefinitely. This case will be forwarded to CPS for further investigation. A shockwave went through the courtroom. My father shot to his feet. You can't do this. She's lying. She trapped us. The judge struck his gavel. One more outburst, Mr. Miller, and you will be removed from this courtroom. Lily covered her face, sobbing loudly. I stood there frozen, tears slipping silently down my cheeks as I held my daughter close. It was over. It was finally, beautifully, completely over. Daniel placed a gentle hand on my back. Grace, you won. I nodded slowly, barely able to breathe. When the judge dismissed us, I turned toward the exit, but my father blocked my path. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You think you've won. You ruined us. I looked him dead in the eyes, strength gathering in me like a rising tide. No, I said softly. You ruined yourselves. The night you threw your daughter and granddaughter into the snow. His face twisted with something between rage and disbelief. And you will never get another chance, I added. Not at her, not at me, not at anything I build. Security stepped between us, guiding him back as he sputtered insults I didn't bother to hear. I walked out of the courthouse with my daughter in my arms, Daniel and Andrew beside me. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but none of it mattered, because sunlight hit my face. Warm, bright, alive. And my daughter reached up with her tiny hand, brushing my chin. In that moment, everything inside me settled. Not fear, not pain, not vengeance, peace. For the first time in my life, I had protected myself, protected her, protected our future. And as we stepped into the car, closing the door on the courthouse behind us, I knew something deep, certain, unshakable. We were no longer surviving the storm. We were rising from it. Grace let the applause fade before she continued, her hands resting lightly on the sides of the podium, her composure steady yet warm under the stage lights. 5 years ago, she said, I stood in a snowstorm with my newborn pressed against my chest and believed my life was over. Today I stand before you as a CEO, a mother, a survivor, and a woman who finally understands her own worth. But this isn't a story about wealth. It's a story about resilience, about rising, about rebuilding. The auditorium of the TEDx event was silent, reverently so. Nearly 1,000 people leaned forward in their seats as her voice echoed through the hall. Grace paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the air. My father and sister believed they could decide my fate, she continued. They believed they could define me. And for a long time I believed that too. But pain doesn't define you. Trauma doesn't define you. What defines you is what you choose to build after surviving it. A quiet shimmer crossed her eyes. Not sadness, not anger, but clarity. The cameras captured everything. Millions would watch this online by the next morning. And she wasn't afraid of that anymore. Her story wasn't a wound now. It was a doorway. She stepped away from the podium slightly and let her hands move as she spoke. When they threw me out into the snow, they didn't just take away a home. They took away my identity, my belief in myself, my trust in love and family. But they didn't take away my strength. They couldn't. And even though I didn't know it at the time, even though I thought the snow was the end, it was actually the beginning. A soft murmur of agreement rose in the crowd. Grace's voice lowered, deepening with emotion. "I'm not special," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not extraordinary. I'm not some miracle woman. I'm just someone who refused to stay down. And every one of you listening now, whether you're sitting here or watching this online later, you have that same power." Her eyes drifted momentarily to the front row. Andrew sat there, reassuring and proud. Beside him, Daniel gave her an encouraging nod. There were no children allowed inside the auditorium, but she knew Charlotte was backstage playing with crayons and waiting to show her the picture she had drawn of Mommy on stage. Grace smiled. "So today," she said, "I want to offer you 3 truths I learned the hard way." She raised one finger. "First, you are not what happened to you. What happened to you is the storm. You are the survivor walking out of it." A second finger. "Second, you don't need anyone's permission to begin again. Not your family, not your partner, not society, not the version of yourself still trapped in fear." A third finger. "And third, when you stand up for yourself, even shaking, even terrified, you don't just change your life. You change the lives of the people watching you." A woman in the third row wiped her tears. A young man with headphones pulled them off slowly, breathing deeply. 2 older women clasped hands. Grace nodded gently, acknowledging the emotion in the room. "After everything I went through," she said, "I decided that surviving wasn't enough. I wanted to make meaning out of the pain. That's why I created the Holt Foundation." A slide appeared behind her with images of shelters, smiling families, women attending job training, children playing in safe homes. "We've helped over 15,000 women escape abusive or toxic family environments. We provide legal support, housing, therapy, career training, and, more than anything, a safe place to start over." The applause was warm, supportive, but she raised her hand to gently quiet them. "I didn't build these programs to save people," she said softly. "I built them so they could learn what I learned, that a door doesn't close unless another one is waiting to open. I'm not their hero, I'm their mirror." She let the final statement hang. "Because if someone like me, who was told she was worthless, who was left in the snow, can rise into a life filled with purpose, so can they. And so can you." The applause surged again, louder, stronger this time. When it settled, Grace moved on. "My father, my sister, they faded from my life. I don't hate them anymore. Honestly, I don't feel anything at all. Pain becomes distance, and eventually, distance becomes peace." The audience listened with stillness. "And peace," she added, "is the greatest inheritance I could give my daughter." A photo of Charlotte appeared on the screen, smiling, holding a stuffed fox, her hair tied in messy pigtails. There were a few soft ahs. "She starts kindergarten today," Grace said proudly. "She is bright, curious, kind, and endlessly brave. I promised her when she was just a tiny newborn in my arms that she would never grow up feeling unloved or unsafe. And every day I keep that promise." Grace inhaled slowly, grounding herself before delivering the final thought. "If I learned anything," she said, "it's that healing isn't a straight line. Sometimes healing looks like crying in the shower, sometimes it looks like signing divorce papers, sometimes it looks like building an empire from ashes, and sometimes healing looks like letting yourself be happy without apologizing for surviving." A soft laugh rippled through the room, warm and understanding. "So, if you're walking through the hardest moment of your life right now," Grace concluded, "this is not your ending. This is your beginning. Get up, even if you crawl, even if it hurts. The snow doesn't last forever. Your spring is coming." The room rose in a standing ovation, an ocean of applause, people wiping tears, people cheering, people inspired in ways they didn't expect when they walked in. Grace bowed her head, overwhelmed but steady. Backstage, when she stepped through the curtains, Charlotte ran to her with open arms. "Mommy, you were so good," Charlotte squealed, tugging at her blazer with both hands. "I drawed you a picture. Want to see?" Grace crouched down and scooped her daughter into her arms, breathing in the familiar, comforting scent of vanilla shampoo. "I want to see everything you make," Grace said, kissing her forehead. Andrew approached with a quiet smile. "You moved them," he said. "Moved all of us." Grace shrugged lightly. "I just told the truth." "The truth," he replied, "is exactly what people needed." As the crowd began filtering out of the auditorium, a young woman with trembling hands approached hesitantly. "Ms. Holt," she whispered, "your story gave me courage. I left my abusive fiancé last month because of something you said in an interview. I just wanted to say thank you." Grace held her gaze gently. "You saved yourself," she said. "Be proud of that." The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. Grace rose, holding Charlotte's hand as they prepared to leave the building. She felt the hum of the world outside waiting, the cool breeze of the evening air, the beginning of something newer and brighter than anything she had known before. And as she stepped through the doors with her daughter skipping beside her, Grace understood something deep in her bones. Her life was no longer defined by what she had escaped. It was defined by what she was building, a legacy of strength, a foundation of compassion, a future where her daughter would never question her worth. Grace walked toward the waiting car, sunlight breaking through the clouds just enough to warm her shoulders. She didn't look back. There was no need to. The storm was behind her, and she was finally, fully, free. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of my penthouse windows, brushing everything with a soft, golden glow. I stood there for a moment, still in my robe, a cup of chamomile tea warming my palms. Below me, the city stretched toward the horizon, steady, alive, moving forward the way I finally was. Today marked 1 year since I became the CEO of Miller & Holt, 1 year since the boardroom confrontation, 1 year since I reclaimed my life. Behind me, Charlotte hummed to herself as she pushed her wooden blocks into a tiny castle. She wore a lavender dress with mismatched socks, her personal fashion statement, and her hair was tied in 2 loose pigtails. She glanced up at me, caught my eye, and flashed a crooked smile that made my heart expand in an instant. "Mommy, can I help you with work today?" she asked. I smiled back at her. "You can help me with everything." Her grin widened, and she went back to arranging her blocks in geometric precision. Watching her like that, safe, loved, growing, was the purest reminder of what all of this was for. I turned away from the window and moved toward the dining table, where folders and documents were spread out in organized piles. While I had assistants now, I still preferred reviewing certain things myself, especially anything related to the Holt Foundation. A new shelter was set to open in 3 weeks, the 4th in our state. This one would focus on young mothers escaping toxic families. Every detail mattered because I knew what it felt like to be one of those women. Before I could sit, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Coffee lobby? 5 minutes." I responded quickly, then walked over to Charlotte. "Sweetheart," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "I have to go downstairs for a few minutes. Miss Avery will be right here with you." She nodded without looking up. "Bring me a muffin?" "What kind?" "Chocolate, the messy kind," I laughed softly. "Done." Miss Avery entered just as I kissed Charlotte's head and grabbed my coat. She gave me a warm smile, already used to our morning rhythm. "We'll work on letters," she said. "Maybe some painting if she's up for it." "Good luck," I teased. "She'll try to convince you to paint the moon again." "That's fine. I like the moon." I left the penthouse and stepped into the private elevator. On the ride down, I caught my reflection in the steel. The woman staring back at me was calm, self-possessed, put together. Not cold, not hardened, just strong, and strong in a way that came from surviving, rebuilding, choosing softness again without losing steel. When the elevator opened, Daniel was already waiting in the lobby, leaning casually against the marble column with 2 coffees in hand. His tie hung slightly loose, as if he'd been rushing all morning, which wouldn't surprise me. "You look like you slept," he said, handing me one. "Can't relate." "I was up late reviewing the shelter's numbers," I said. "Blame me for your exhaustion." He shook his head. "Helping women rebuild their lives isn't the worst workload." We sat down on a sofa near the tall glass windows. People passed through the lobby, some greeting me with polite nods, others pretending not to stare. Fame wasn't something I ever wanted, but when your trauma becomes a public catalyst for change, you don't get to choose anonymity. Daniel cleared his throat. "There's something we should talk about," he said. His tone made me straighten. "Is the board giving you trouble again?" "No, nothing like that. It's about your father and Lily." For a second, the air around me seemed to tighten, then slowly release. It had been months since I thought about them at all. "What about them?" I asked. "They applied for assistance through the foundation. Under different names, but it wasn't hard to verify." I stared at him, processing. The foundation wasn't built to punish, but to heal. Still, I felt a faint, distant sting, like touching an old bruise that no longer hurts but still remembers. "What did they say?" I asked. "That they're homeless, jobless, and that they have no family willing to help." A bitter irony, though even bitterness felt too heavy for them now. Daniel continued, "We don't need to accept them. We can reject the application under grounds of conflict of interest." I looked out toward the street. People hurried along the sidewalks, wrapped in coats, carrying coffee cups, talking into phones. Lives moving forward in 1,000 different directions. Meanwhile, Thomas and Lily were stuck in the wreckage of their choices. "I don't hate them anymore," I said finally. "I don't want revenge. But I also don't want them anywhere near my world." Daniel nodded. "I understand." "Reject the application," I said softly. "But include information for other assistance programs not affiliated with us." His brows lifted slightly. "Merciful?" "No," I said. "Boundaries aren't mercy. They're survival." He considered that, then smiled with quiet respect. "You've grown into someone incredible, Grace." I exhaled slowly. I just grew into myself. We finished our coffee together, talking briefly about upcoming board meetings and the TEDx talk that had gone viral overnight. When we parted ways, he walked into the elevator to head toward the 52nd floor, while I stepped outside into the crisp morning air to pick up the chocolate muffin Charlotte requested. As I was walking back with a small paper bag in hand, my phone buzzed again. A message from the Foundation's emergency intake team. A woman arrived at the West Side shelter 15 minutes ago. 3-month-old infant. Severe frostbite on her hands. Says her family forced her out into the cold last night. I stopped mid-step, my chest tightening, breath catching. It was too familiar, too close, too much like the voice I once had when begging the snow not to take my daughter from me. I typed back immediately. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Prepare a private room. Medical staff on standby." I hurried into the building, handed Charlotte her muffin, kissed her cheek, and told Avery I needed to go out for a little while. Charlotte looked up at me with crumbs already on her lips. "Are you helping someone?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, kneeling in front of her. "Someone who needs us." She nodded as if she understood everything. "Make sure she's warm." "I will." When I arrived at the shelter, the staff led me to a quiet room. There, sitting on a cot with a hospital blanket around her shoulders, was a young woman, maybe 23, with red, raw fingers wrapped around a tiny baby. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "I know who you are," she whispered. "I watched your story. I thought, if you survived, maybe I could too." Her voice cracked on the final word, shattering something inside me. I sat beside her, gently placing my hand over hers. "You're safe now," I told her. "No one is going to hurt you again." She broke into tears, silent, shaking tears, the kind that are more release than sorrow. I called the medical team, stayed until the baby was cleared, and promised the mother she would have a warm bed tonight, real meals, legal help, therapy, and a chance to rebuild from the ashes. When I finally returned home that evening, Charlotte ran into my arms again. "Did you help her?" she asked. "Yes," I said, lifting her into a tight embrace. "We helped her." She rested her head on my shoulder. "Good. Everyone deserves someone. Everyone deserves someone." Her words echoed in my mind long after I put her to bed. Later that night, I stepped onto the balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The city lights sparkled, the air smelled faintly of pine from a vendor down the street, and somewhere far off I could hear a violinist playing near the plaza. Life had moved on, not perfectly, not painlessly, but beautifully. I realized something else then. The greatest revenge was not wealth, not power, not exposing the people who hurt me. The greatest revenge was joy, the kind of joy that comes from rebuilding, from reclaiming, from choosing softness in a world that once tried to break me. I looked up at the night sky, the same sky that watched me bleed in the snow years ago, and whispered a quiet thank you to whatever force in the universe believed I deserved a second chance. I wasn't the woman they threw away, I was the woman who rose, and that was enough. If you've listened to my story all the way to the end, I hope you walk away with this. Your past doesn't get to decide who you become. You do. And if you're standing in your own storm right now, please don't give up. The snow doesn't last forever. Spring always comes. And when it does, you'll be stronger than you ever imagined. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or if you simply want to hear more stories of justice, survival, and rebirth, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more voices, more courage, and more hope into the world. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are rising. And I'll be right here, telling these stories, every step of the way.